Daily Broadside, day 526. Been a long day, or a late day, I should say, but I was in my hometown, not far from where I live currently, and I rode by a place not far from my house, and I was reminded of a funny story. Funny, at least, amusing, I guess. But back in the day, it's like a Harbor Freight now, I think, but or I don't think it is, but it used to be a Zayres when I was a kid, which is like a Kmart. I mean, it was like a regional Kmart. I don't know how far Zayres, Zayres apostrophe is, stretched across the country. But I love Zayres. They had the best toy department in the known universe, right? Because Kmart was always kind of like low rent. It didn't, like, they would have like GoBots, not Transformers, that kind of thing. You know, it was that kind of vibe there, right? But I was reminded of the craze, and it was probably like 1985, something like that. I'm 9, 10 years old, and the Cabbage Patch dolls hit the scene, right? Every little girl had to have a Cabbage Patch doll. And so, as is customary, when you have a sibling of the other sex, you got to do stuff you don't like doing sometimes. So I get drawn into the car, and we're off to Zayres to go get a Cabbage Patch doll, which in and of itself doesn't sound that bad. But when we got there, we had to wait like an hour and a half. I remember lining up in Zayres with like 50 other people in line. I mean, it was like getting tickets for Taylor Swift in 1985. It was really weird. And you were like, why does this take so long? And they were like bringing them out of the back. Like the store had sold out. They had like a pallet of them in the back, and they were bringing them out one at a time. And I can't remember the process, but I remember it was first come, first serve or whatever. But the funny part of this story is we're like almost dead last in line. And I'm like, and it's just, I'm bored out of my mind because we're not even in the toy section. We're in like the clothing section. So we're like lined up in the boring part of the store. So there's not anything to do, right? So we get there, right? And we're waiting. And finally it's our turn, all right? And my sister gets there and she gets her little doll. And I remember it came in a box. It was a pretty big box. And it you can see the whole doll. It had like a cellophane, plastic, whatever cover. And you can see the whole animal. Or not animal, but what do you call it? Baby. And it had like adoption papers and all. It was a thing, right? These things were like wildfire across the county, or across the country, I should say. Just every little girl had to have one. Well, we get to the very end, and the only one they had was a black male doll. And I texted my mom earlier. I said, because I just totally forgotten about this, and there's nothing wrong with having a black doll. There really isn't. I mean, but it was the fact that it was a dude made it the funniest part of it, right? So she's got this black kid, like a boy, as her Cabbage Patch doll. And I laughed. I was like, this is so stupid. That's all they had left was why do they have male dolls? Like, there's no dudes in line for this stuff. This is all girls wanting these things, but they've got, white and black boys and these dolls. But I guess, well, then again, I guess if you're adopting it, you could have a boy, but most girls would want a girl. I mean, Barbies, probably sell a lot more than Ken, which I heard the other day that Barbies sell like 100 a minute every day. I find that hard to believe because that is insane. I don't know what a Barbie costs these days, but I want to say when I was a kid, she used to get them and they were like 12, 14 bucks a piece or something in the 80s. Like, it was a crazy amount of money compared to like a G.I. Joe, which costs like $4, maybe $3.50. It was an expensive doll, but if they sell 100 of those a minute, I don't know what the 2023 rate for a Barbie is, but if it was in the low teens in the 80s, I can't imagine it's any less than $28, $30 or whatever. But anyway, so I text my mom. I'm like, hey, I said, I just remembered this stupid story. I said, do you remember the name? Because I couldn't quite place the name. And she's let me think about it for a minute. And sure enough, she came back like a few minutes later. Woodrow Beldon, Beldon. Woodrow. And as soon as I read Woodrow, I'm like, yep, that was it. Woodrow, the Cabbage Patch boy doll, I think she later got like a little white girl, and all. But I just thought that was kind of funny that we waited, an hour and a half, and all they had left was a little black kid, And I'm like, I just thought it was weird that there were boys in the first place. But, maybe that's not funny. I just thought it was funny. But anyway, I'll tell you an odd thing that I did that I encourage everybody to do at some point in their life because it was kind of cool. My buddy Teeter and I were in, I don't know, probably 10th grade. I know we could drive, so it was 10th or 11th grade, and we're sitting around in my house, and there's just kind of nothing to do, and we're just doing whatever. And a storm came along. You could hear it start to rain, and I had this brilliant idea in my head. I was like, hey, let's go figure out where the rain ends. And he's like, what? I was like, at some point, there's got to be a transition between rain and no rain. And he's like, I don't get it. I was like, just hop in the car. So we hop in his car. I think he drove. Maybe I drove. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But we drove probably 2.5 miles. And I remember it was not far from, it was almost right in front of this girl we went to school with named Cammie Simpson, who was a transplant from some other state or something. But anyway, that's not important. But it was right in front of her house. We're driving, and we see kind of like the road isn't wet, and then the road is wet. And so we drive through the rain. We stop, and we get out in the middle of the street, right? And we walk. And I shit you not, we were able to walk with the rain at a brisk pace. Rain goes a little faster than you think. But like my back was getting wet, and the front of me was completely dry. And we were just walking along with the rain. And I looked over at him, and he looked over at me, and we were like, I just never thought I'd see this day. I didn't think this was a thing for me to even do, you know? And it happened. It happened. And so I say that to say this. I have found the edge of the rain, and it's actually a pretty surreal experience. But I will say this, and I'm sure rain can move a lot faster than it did that day, but you don't just walk along, you know, it's a fairly brisk pace to keep up with the rain, because it moves pretty good. But it's a weird feeling and a weird sensation that I encourage everybody to do at least once you find yourself bored and all. You know, they make these tattoo removal machines that, I looked them up the other day. They're $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, right? And it looks very satisfying. You know, I've got a buddy that had it done one time, and he said it was extremely painful, as most people, you know, it hurts a lot more than getting the tattoo. But you watch it, and you're like, it's very satisfying to watch, but like a dummy could do this. You know, it's like erasing a marker on a Marks-a-Lot board. I mean, there's nothing to it, right? Well, what is the training? You know, it's kind of like Seinfeld. Well, where's the meat go? Where do you cut it on? But where does the meat go? You know, you know how to use a deli slicer now, right? You cut the machine on. I guess it blows cold air with that one tube, and then you just outline the tattoo, and it goes away. But here's my thing, right? I think somebody should just like buy one of those things, you know, a cheap model, because they charge, you know, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I mean, you'll spend, you know, several $1,000s trying to get rid of a tattoo that you don't have anymore, you know? Why don't you just buy one that, you know, is a cheaper version and charge like, you know, a tattoo rate? Hey, it costs you $150 an hour to get this thing off. I'll take it off for $110, you know? Because there's nothing to it, right? I mean, you'd make money hand or fist, because people get some really regrettable tattoos. You just come in there, $110 minimum charge. I mean, it obviously, it only takes like 30 seconds to take a tattoo off in one session, and they're charging you hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Somebody should be undercutting the ever-living dog piss out of those people, because that's just a lot to charge for something that just I mean, I get the equipment is expensive. There's a lot of overhead involved, but still, I think it's quantity over quality, maybe. And there's really the same quality, I imagine. A $10,000 machine, a $30,000 machine. I mean, how much difference could it really, I mean, if it takes the tattoo off in time, what's a big deal, you know? And I think if you're a 600-pound person, or one of them 600-pound life, you've got to be the one that owns the house. You know what I mean? Because, you know, all these people have girlfriends and boyfriends, so they're all feeder enabler people, of course, but they're technically in love with someone. But here's the thing, right? You break up with your girl, and you're like, out of my house, right? I'm done with you. And he starts throwing her crap out on the lawn, or she starts throwing his crap on the lawn. Those dudes can't just get up, pack a bag, and leave. A, they don't have a car. B, they don't fit in cars. C, they don't have a dump truck that's going to haul their ass to the next house. D, they don't have a house to go to. E, they don't have luggage big enough to pack all their food up. They can't just, you know, they don't have clothes because they just wear like towels all day long. Like, that's not a very conducive thing to just breaking up. So you've got to be, if you're going to be the 600-pound person, you got to be the one that owns the house. So when it's time to break up, you still have a place to forage for food, you know. You can still exist, because it doesn't work the other way around. That's just not, that ain't the type of thing where you just, girl goes out in the yard and sets all your shoes on fire and kicks you out, because you ain't got nowhere to go, and she can't make you leave. Police come, what are they going to do? They going to lift you and make you leave? They ain't taking you to jail. You weigh 600 pounds. You don't fit in any of their vehicles, or the jail for that matter. And I'm not making light of the situation, but then again, they put themselves in that situation, so that's all I have for that. Get him.